when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control that Christ has regarded my helpless estate and hath shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. My sin, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, taste the day when the faith shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul.
We invite you to stay tuned for the live broadcast of the Wednesday evening Bible study of Mayfield Drive Baptist Church, located in Smyrna, Tennessee. We will now join the service.
All right. We welcome you back to the Mayfield Drive Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study. And this evening, we start a brand new study that we will be doing. I'll be doing this jointly with Jamie, my son. And we are going to be addressing some things that may be controversial, unpopular, you name it. But this, as if we hadn't done that before, huh? This study, this is not the lesson for this evening, but this overall study that we're going to do is called Answers for Modern Christian Questions. Answers for Modern Christian Questions. There are many, especially young people and young adults, have a lot of questions that they do not feel as if the church, quote unquote, and I'm using that term, you're going to find that I've got the word church in this study, or at least for our lesson this evening, in quotations, because I'm not using it in the truest sense of what we understand a church is. Okay, I want to be right up front with that. So when I use the word church, and I've got it in quotation marks, you'll know that I'm using it in the vernacular sense, in the let's see, I'm trying to describe how I think how to describe. Yes, how the world would think that church is. Okay, so yes, right. Um, yes, that is correct. And so sometimes we have to think in the way that they think in order to be able to answer their questions. Yes. Yes, out of our box, anyway. That I had a gentleman who was a pastor of a Baptist church, but he gave me a book entitled I can't think of the exact title, but anyway, answering biblical questions with secular terms. In other words, you are going to use secular language to answer questions that people of the world might have. You couch your answers in quote-unquote spiritual terms, they're going to turn you off. They're not going to listen to you. So we have to learn how to answer questions in, shall I say, the vernacular. In other words, the everyday language that the average person speaks and understands. And if someone doesn't understand us, we haven't made any progress with him. We want to be, we are misunderstood enough as it is. Okay? We don't have to make it any more difficult for them to misunderstand us. So these answers for modern Christian questions are going to be varied from lesson to lesson. How that we're going to do this, Jamie and I will be sort of tag teaming, so to speak. I will do this lesson this evening. Next week, he will do a different lesson, but still in this framework of questions that many people have that they do not feel like that the church, quote unquote, is answering. Okay. So the first one that we're doing this evening is sexual abuse by clergy. Now, by way of introduction, there are many times questions are asked for which those of the quote-unquote church are unable to answer or unwilling to answer. There is one major thing that turns away a large percentage of church or our people because they come away with the impression that people who are in the quote-unquote church either cannot, I left out a word there. Jamie, you missed that in your proofing. They cannot answer their questions, or worse still, don't care. Don't care enough to try to answer them. We do not want to fit into that category, do we? In the questioner's eyes, this is a major failure because the quote-unquote church has nothing to offer to them in any form. Therefore, they turn away and are not receptive to anything that resembles something spiritual. Within this series, we will address some of the questions that the quote-unquote church seems not to or cannot answer. It could be either one of those. These are questions that many young adults never seem to get answered, causing them to turn away and seek something else. Many will say, well, I don't like organized religion. Okay. Why? And you know, sad to say, those bad things many times do happen. And most of the time, they are things that could have been avoided if God's people would have their hearts right to begin with. We're going to look this evening. This first question is one of the biggest. Sexual abuse by clergy. Now, if you notice, I'm using clergy. That is a secular term. Okay? But I'm using that because it will include, of necessity, anyone who is in spiritual leadership or who could be considered to be a spiritual authority. Okay? What is, if you're going to look at sexual abuse by clergy, well, just exactly what is sexual abuse? What is defined today concerning sexual abuse? We just years ago, and not a long time ago, we never heard anything about this unless some major scandal would happen concerning a quote-unquote clergyman or nowadays clergywoman. And we'd never know about it unless it was so big that the press got a hold of it and blasted it all over everywhere. And even then, it had to be of a very serious nature before that would ever come about. But not so today. Not so today. So we need to understand what is considered to be sexual abuse. And it's probably not what you think. Yes.
Not considered, say, 10 years ago, it can be now.
That's right.
So,
As time goes on and generations, one after another, come into authority, we're going to find things will change. And sometimes big time. One of the major problems in the world of religion today is one, I'm sorry, that's supposed to be one, not on, of sexual abuse by the clergy. And let me add right here at the very front, and we'll discuss this in more detail later on. It is not so much of the sexual abuse, it's almost as if everyone expects it to be so. But I'll tell you what is the worst thing and what will really turn people away from church, any church, is cover-ups. Cover-ups. Okay? They are not so shocked at the abuse as they are of attempts to cover it up as if it never happened. So, one of the major problems today in the world of religion and even in business, okay, is sexual abuse by the clergy. Now, we've all heard of the problems that the Catholic Church has had and is still having. And so let us first look at this, and then we will examine that problem outside of the Catholic Church. Although the problem of sexual abuse by clergy has been around a long time, it was not until the 20th century that it became well known. You didn't hear much about it. It was there. Even back in the 1200s, and on farther. We could probably go back even much farther than that. I just picked that as a random.
it makes you wonder how many of when the priests were having sex in the New Testament, the priests were having sex in the temple itself. I wonder how much of that was started by sexual abuse.
That is true. This has been a problem with quote unquote spiritual authorities ever since there has been spiritual authority. Okay? But it was not until the 20th century that it really began to seem to be prevalent. Let me say, it began to be known. And society as a whole became very much aware of sexual abuse by clergy. Yes.
It would be known. One of the things when they had the golden calf and all the things that's going on back in Bible times, way back there, all of those things, it wasn't just that was the problem. It was all the other things, the extemporaneous things that was going on with the golden calf.
True. All right, this is because those youths who had been abused as young people are now adults living in the 21st century where these things are constantly being brought to light. Let me say, anyone in a type of leadership, any leadership, business, education, religion, corporate, you name it, anyone in leadership is going to be susceptible to be accused of sexual abuse. I did a seminar for the Civil Air Patrol on a subject similar to this, and about what chaplains would be facing and do face as a chaplain in a military setting. And it was it was enlightening, I'll tell you. To prevent misunderstanding about what we are referring, let us define just what sexual abuse is within the ministerial relationship. And not just ministerial relationship. These parameters apply in just about any setting. Business, corporate, educational, religion, okay? Faith Trust Institute defines it in this manner. Quote, sexual abuse happens when someone in a ministerial role, clergy, religious, or lay, engages in sexual contact or sexualized behavior with a congregant, employee, student, or counseling client in this ministerial relationship. And so I'm going to leave these other categories behind because we are looking at the ministerial relationship. We are looking at churches and quote-unquote church people. Okay? So even though these things exist in these other categories, corporate, business, religion, education, etc., those are the main, we're going to concentrate on religion, that category. Continue. Sexual abuse can include physical contact from the person in a ministerial role, such as sexual touch and accidental touch of sexual areas of the body. Just a touch, even if it's accidental. Tickling and playful aggression that seem uncomfortable to you. A prolonged hug where a brief hug is customary behavior. Kissing on the lips when a kiss on the cheek would be appropriate. Pressing up against your body when hugging. An inappropriate gift from your religious leader, such as lingerie. Sexual intercourse with your religious leader. Most of the time, we think of sexual abuse in this category. But it's not just this. Some of it can get ridiculous. But we need to know what that is regardless. Sexual abuse can also include verbal behavior initiated by a person in a ministerial role when such behavior sexualizes a relationship. examples include innuendo or sexual talk, suggestive comments, tales of his or her sexual exploits or experiences, questions about the intimate details of your relationships, looking for sympathy about his or her partner's sexual inadequacies. You know, counselors have to really be careful these days because, and pastors are many times have to counsel with people. And any pastor or a spiritual leader, religious leader, many times finds themselves in the role of being a counselor. Chaplains, pastors, Christian counselors, etc. And we have to be very careful on how we word things. That's one of the reasons I don't like counseling. Yes.
Also, what we see in our hallway with the windows, that's getting to be a necessity anymore. The windows in the Sunday school classrooms.
Yes. So, as can be seen from the extended definition above, previously, it does not take much for something innocent to quickly become something forbidden and wrong. This article continues, by the Faith Trust Institute, continues to address why it is wrong. Quote, sexual contact or sexualized behavior within the ministerial relationship is a violation of professional ethics. He said, now, wait a minute. A preacher is not professional. Yes, he is. He is considered to be Brother Jamie, will you contact Brother Scott and see Brother John, and he may be calling about a problem. He may be trying to listen and can't. All right, let me start over here. Sexual contact or sexualized behavior within the ministerial relationship is a violation of professional ethics. Like it or not, pastors and preachers are considered to be professionals. I don't care whether you went to a seminary or school of religion or what, but because of the occupation, I guess you would say. These individuals are considered to be professionals and must conduct themselves according to certain ways. There is a difference in power between a person in a ministerial role and a member of his or her congregation or a counselee. You get that? We do not consider a pastor to be above any other member of the congregation, but that's not how the world looks at it. And we must be cognizant of that. Any spiritual leader must understand that. Or he or she, as the matter may be. And I know we don't believe in women preachers. I understand that. But there are women that put themselves into that kind of a role, and that makes them just as accountable as it is a male.
Brother Joe, also, and we must be mindful, that
Yes, it does. Anyone in any type of leadership position, deacon, pastor, youth leader, Sunday school teachers, etc., even nursery workers.
Brother Joe, also in that, that when there's a violation of that perimeter, and the individual that has been violated, will, for most part, lawfully, they won't just go after the pastor, they'll go after the whole church.
Right.
They will bankrupt the church.
Right. Yes. Because of this difference in power, you cannot give meaningful consent to the sexual relationship. And power is there, whether we like to admit it or not, especially in the eyes of the world. Individuals usually seek counseling or support from their religious leader at times of stress or crisis. During those times, you are emotionally vulnerable and can be taken advantage of by a religious leader. And that's, again, faithtrustinstitute.org. Now, let's look at the sexual abuse within the Catholic Church. As I stated previously, sexual abuse within the Catholic Church has been around a long, long time. But it was not well known Boy, I should have proofread this better. It was not well known to be widespread until the 20th and 21st century. Wikipedia has this to say concerning this problem, and I quote, "There have been many cases of sexual abuse of children by priests, nuns, and other members of religious life in the Catholic Church. In the 20th and 21st centuries, these cases have involved many allegations, investigations, trials, convictions, acknowledgement, and apologies by church authorities, and revelations about decades of instances of abuse and attempts by church officials to cover them up. The abused include mostly boys, but also girls, some as young as 3 years old, with the majority being between the ages of 11 and 14. Criminal cases, for the most part, do not cover sexual harassment of adults. Now, there are exceptions, but it's not the norm. The accusations of abuse and cover-ups began to receive public attention during the late 1980s. Many of these cases allege decades of abuse, frequently by adults or older youth, years after the abuse occurred. And you say, isn't there a statute of limitations? Not always. Not always. Cases have also been brought against members of the Catholic hierarchy who covered up sex abuse allegations and moved abusive priests to other parishes where abuse continued.
Brother Joe, also on that same thing about moving, what the average individual doesn't realize, the Catholic hierarchy is a government within themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're not called to a church, they are moved by the Catholic hierarchy. So when, to save their face, when this happens, they just move that priest to a different diocese somewhere away from here.
That's
Damage
correct.
has been done.
That's correct. The Catholic Church is not the only, quote unquote, religious organization, church, that assigns its ministers. There are others that do that as well. By the 1990s, the cases began to receive significant media and public attention in several countries, including in Canada, United States, Chile, Australia, Ireland, and much of Europe and South America. Pope John Paul II was criticized by representatives of the victims of clergy sexual abuse for failing to respond quickly enough to the Catholic sex abuse crisis. And after decades of inaction, Sinead O'Connor brought the scandal to a head when she tore up a photo of John Paul II on a 1992 episode of Saturday Night Live. The protest drew praise from critics of the church, but also the ire of many Catholics, which greatly damaged her career and had a strong possibility of putting her life in danger. Her protest would see increased positive reappraisal as corruption and suppression efforts by the church related to abuse became more popularly known. In 2002, an investigation by the Boston Globe, which later inspired the film Spotlight, led to widespread media coverage of the issue in the United States. Widespread abuse has also been exposed in Europe, Australia, and Chile, reflecting worldwide patterns of long-term abuse as well as the church hierarchy's pattern of regularly covering up reports of abuse. From 2001 to 2010, the Holy See, that's the Vatican, okay, examined sex abuse cases involving about 3,000 priests, some of which dated back 50 years. Diocesan officials and academics knowledgeable about the Catholic Church say that sexual abuse by clergy is generally not discussed and thus is difficult to measure. Members of the church's hierarchy have argued that media coverage was excessive and disproportionate, and that such abuse also takes place in other religions and institutions, a stance that dismayed representatives from other religions who saw it as a device to distance the church from controversy. But yet, it was true. In a 2001 apology, John Paul II called sexual abuse within the church a, quote, profound contradiction of the teaching and witness of Jesus Christ. Benedict XVI apologized, met with victims, and spoke of his, quote unquote, shame at the evil of abuse, calling for perpetrators to be brought to justice, denouncing mishandling by church authorities. In January 2018, referring to a particular case in Chile, Pope Francis accused victims of fabricating allegations. By April, he was apologizing for his, quote-unquote, tragic error. And by August, was expressing, quote, shame and sorrow for the tragic history. He convened a 4-day summit meeting with the participation of the presidents of all the Episcopal conferences of the world, which was held in Vatican City from 21 to 24 February 2019, to discuss preventing sexual abuse by Catholic Church clergy. In December 2019, Pope Francis made sweeping changes that allow for greater transparency. In June 2021, a team of UN special rapporteurs for the Office of Human Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, criticized the Vatican, pointing to persistent allegations that the Catholic Church had obstructed and failed to cooperate with domestic judicial proceedings in order to prevent accountability for abusers and compensation for victims. Now, even though all of this has been brought to light, many feel that the Catholic hierarchy has not done enough to address the problem. There are many places in the world where this has been prominent in the Catholic Church. Places such as United States, Canada, Ireland, the United Kingdom, the Philippines, Belgium, France, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, countries in Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. All of these major regions of the world have seen this as a major problem with the Roman Catholic Church. While many of the guilty have been discovered and prosecuted, there is a great concern that nearly 1,700 of these priests, deacons, monks, and lay people who have left the Catholic Church before being brought to justice have found work as teachers, counselors, nurses, and volunteers at nonprofits aimed at helping at-risk children. Many of this number, since leaving the Catholic Church, have committed crimes, including sexual assault and of possessing child pornography. Now, those statistics were from an article in the Associated Press, October the 2nd, 2019, by Claudia Lauer and Megan Hoyer. Well, that was not a direct quote. It was taking those quotations. Yes? Huh? October 4th. What did I say? 2nd? Okay. Sorry about that. A 2 doesn't look like a 4, that's for sure. All right, now let's go outside the Catholic Church. We may think, oh, that's just terrible that sexual abuse by clergy in the Catholic Church is almost worldwide. But the Catholic Church is not the only one. Several sexual abuse scandals have involved abuse of religious authority and often cover-up among non-abusers, including cases in, here we go, Southern Baptist Convention, Catholic Church, we already know that, Episcopalian religion, Islam. Did that surprise you? Jehovah's Witness, Lutheran Church, Methodist Church. This one might surprise you. Anabaptist Mennonite Church. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormons. The Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They didn't know there was such one thing existing like that. Orthodox Judaism. Other branches of Judaism. Various Buddhist schools, such as Zen and Tibetan. Yoga classes. And various cults.
Brother Joe, on the top, the one, the Southern Baptist, in May 15th, 2022, the Southern Baptist Church released a 205-page list of hundreds of alleged abusers, which was compiled by former employees of Southern Baptist Convention. And by the way, these are credibly accused. Of one of them in there, I know personally. That's 205 pages.
Yes.
And we wonder why people shy away from church.
Right. Now, I'm speaking personally now. I have had reported to me personally, unsubstantiated reports, okay, Can't say that these can be proved, but they are credible. Reports of abuse occurring within fundamental Baptist works. Okay? I have to say unsubstantiated because I was shown no proof, just testimonies given which were given in good faith. That would make it credible. That would make it to the point that an investigation would be warranted. In addition, and I have to say this, I did not realize this until today, as I was putting the finishing touches to this message, this lesson this evening. I personally have been abused while attending an ABA seminary. That was many years ago. And I'm sure that most, if not all, beside myself, those who were aware of it are now deceased. Regardless, I am living proof that it can happen anytime, anywhere, anytime. Now, I'm not going into details here with the lesson this evening, but when Jamie and I get this into final print, I will have the details in it. I was actually unaware of it until I was developing this work and came to the realization that what I had experienced fell into the category of sexual abuse.
Brother Joe, and of course, I'm another one that can say, but as a child, a member of a church, when you have someone who is in a teaching position, and you're a child, and this individual touches you inappropriately and tells you he wants to be your friend, as a child, you feel like you've done the dirty thing. But the very same guy that did that, he had molested 50 boys. One of them was the pastor's son that later on he became a youth minister and abused a child. And when he went to another church, he told the pastor didn't do anything about it. The abused one brought it to court with his parents. The church was sued for I forget how many millions of dollars. But the abuser now, he's like this, he's already passed away. So it does happen.
Had I said something, this individual could have been charged legally, because even though I was in a seminary, I was still a minor. I left home. I graduated from high school at the age of 16. I turned 17 in June, and I left home permanently in August. I was 17 years old when I first entered an ABA seminary. This was an upperclassman that did all of this. But here I am, this youngster fresh off the farm, so to speak. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what the proper and appropriate actions were. I was green as a gourd, so to speak. I recognized the fact that this man was doing things that should not be done, and it was aimed at me personally But I didn't know enough to go to my authorities, the leader of the school, who years later we were discussing this. And he told me, he said, I wish you would have said something then. He said, because we could have stopped a chain of events concerning this individual. Of course, at this time, I was a pastor myself. And I was cognizant of all of these things by that time. But I was too young and inexperienced to know what to do. I know that I was very violent toward him. And the president of the school made this comment. One time, this fellow just laid his hand on my arm. I jerked my arm away very violently and told him, don't you ever touch me again, very viciously, in front of the other students. We were on break, including many faculty members and the president of the school that I was having this conversation. He said, you know, he said, now I understand what happened then. He said, many of us had questions. What is going on when you had that kind of reaction? And that was not the way you normally are. Like I said, I'm not going to go into details in this lesson, but you'll have to read the finished product to get the details. There's much more to it.
Nice page.
Yeah. All right, the dangers of Baptist fundamentalism as in what we are seeing today, coming out with inappropriate sexual acts by clergy and cover-ups in, quote-unquote, Baptist works. That is the problem. This is a very real problem that is widespread in its scope. The scriptures have plenty to say concerning this type of problem. And all we must do is to look at the book of Romans and see what Paul had to say. Now, I'm not going to the book of Romans, but you can look at it yourself. And in fact, I'm not covering all the scriptures that could pertain to this, okay? But I do want to look at what Jesus, when he had gathered children around him, he gave this warning. Matthew 18, verse 6. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. A millstone is usually a huge stone that has been carved into two flat surfaces with a hole in the middle. And it is made into a wheel, actually. And it is rotated on top of another millstone to crush, to make flour. Okay? Those things are huge, many of them. And even a small one would be very heavy. And in Mark chapter 9, verse 42, same situation. And whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he were cast into the sea. And then one more, same situation, Luke 17 and verse number 2. It were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he cast into the sea than that he should offend one of these little ones. The word offend means to do harm to. the penalty of doing harm to someone, especially a child or youth, is very severe. A millstone is quite large, and if a person is attached to one, before being thrown into the depths of waters, there is only one result: death by drowning. These passages, and there are many more, reveal to us that God takes a dim view of sins committed against another human being, especially those that are young. The scriptures indicate that those who are in spiritual leadership will receive greater damnation if they are lost than someone who is not in that position. You want to know someone who will receive greater punishment in the eternal lake of fire than someone like Mussolini or Hitler? That is a spiritual leader who has led by their leadership hundreds, if not thousands, of people to hell because they have not preached to them the gospel of Jesus Christ, and maybe even abused many of those. Yes?
Couldn't that be said of George Soros, because he sold children to the gas chamber?
I wouldn't even touch that with a 10-foot pole, but humanly, I would say yes. That's the flesh speaking. Okay. If the person is saved, God will still deal harshly with him or her because of it. How do we deal with it? When the sin comes to light, it is important that it be dealt with quickly. It must be proven as fact against the offender and not simply an accusation. Many good men and women have been destroyed because of a false accusation and an incomplete investigation not conducted. So there is caution there. Any such accusation must be ascertained as being true before any further action is taken. It must be proven. Many innocent people have been accused and later proven not guilty. But because of the seriousness of it, it must be investigated and not covered up or ignored. The biggest problem with the sexual abuse by clergy has not necessarily been the abuse itself, and I'm not negating that. Even though that is without question very serious, it is the either ignoring it or trying to cover it up that's worse.
Brother Joe. And on that same thing, it's really evil when the church will, they won't address it because of the individual has a certain status. And many times that's where the big problem is. It may not be the pastor, but maybe someone in the church that needs to be dealt with, but the church won't deal with it.
That is correct.
Bring that get blackballed.
It may be someone other than the pastor. That's correct. Many times the victim is the one to suffer the most when either of these is done. Sin, especially of this type, must be confronted and dealt with in the proper manner. If it concerns a minor, legal avenues must be pursued without doubt. If a minor is not involved, it still must be dealt with in a proper and appropriate manner. In addition to God's authority, the appropriate human authority must, and I capitalize that word must to emphasize it, take action or take the proper action to make sure that justice is done. Never should it be ignored and, quote, swept under the rug, unquote. In conclusion, we may never be able to prevent people from sexually abusing someone, but we must never fail to deal with it appropriately if we find ourselves in this situation. God takes these things seriously, and so should we. This may not stop people from leaving the church when things like this happen. But we should make sure, to the furthest extent of our authority and capabilities, to make sure that things are done appropriately and scripturally. And not cover it up, ignore it, not pay attention to it. That doesn't get it. Questions, comments?
We here at International Missionary Baptist Ministries are so thankful that you chose to watch or listen to this Wednesday evening Bible study. We will be broadcasting again at this same time next week. If you wish to contact us, we can be reached via email at imbr@imbmpodcasts.com. Our mailing address is International Missionary Baptist Radio, P.O. Box 1676, Smyrna, Tennessee, 37167. Again, I repeat, our email address is imbr@imbmpodcasts.com. Podcast is plural there. Our snail mail is International Missionary Baptist Radio, P.O. Box 1676, Smyrna, Tennessee, 37167. We thank you so very much for watching or listening. We hope that this was a blessing to you.